name is Megan McMillan with Heritage Auctions. I specialize in illustration art, and I'm really excited to talk about our next auction, which is happening on April 25th, just a few weeks away. And I'm here with David Leopoldo, creative director of the Hirschfeld Foundation, to talk about a few of the amazing pieces that they have allowed us to offer this season. So David,
yes,
tell us about Hirschfeld. I mean, we talk all the time about it, but tell our collectors about Hirschfeld.
Well, Hirschfeld was one of the most ubiquitous artists of the 20th century. There were few places his work did not appear. Most famously, he appeared in the New York Times for on average every other Sunday for 75 years. But that was just one of the publications he appeared in. That represents less than half of his work. There are people who know him just for his TV guide work. He did more covers for that magazine than any other artist, and he did many drawings for the interior of the magazine. One of them is in this upcoming sale. Record covers. They started doing record covers in 1938. Hirschfeld started about 2 years later, and some used record stores have, instead of just having sections for the recording artists, they'll sometimes have Hirschfeld album covers because there's so many wonderful ones. And his drawings of dancers, we call his 82-year career the Hirschfeld century, because he defined so much of American popular culture, primarily through his drawings of productions on Broadway and in Hollywood. Because he got to start in Hollywood. In fact, we're recording this on April 12th, and this is the 98th anniversary of his very first published caricature.
Really?
Yes.
What was
And
it?
it was for a Warner Brothers film. It was not for the theater. He wouldn't do the theater for another 18 months. So the Hirschfeld's always, it's like one of those lotus petals. You just keep peeling it away, and there's something more you learn.
Absolutely. And I know we have a few really awesome pieces in this auction. So do you want to start with your favorite or the most important?
Well, my favorite, that's a tough one because these are all really great drawings.
Of course.
Obviously, there are a couple of stars in this show. I think the biggest star is Marlene Dietrich. The drawing he did of Dietrich that's in the show from 1967 for her one-woman show at the Lunt-Fontanne Theater is a truly iconic work. There is nobody could draw her like Hirschfeld, and Hirschfeld not only had been drawing her for close to 25 years at that point. He started drawing her for MGM in the mid 1940s, but she was also a close personal friend. Hirschfeld's wife at the time was the German actress Dolly Haas, and Marlene had grown up seeing Dolly's films and was a great admirer of her, and they became great friends. The German expatriate community was a very tight-knit community, especially during the 40s and 50s. But then Marlene's daughter moved 2 doors down from the Hirschfelds, and she was a regular visitor to her daughter's home. And Marlene being Marlene, she would like to take the children out, but she knew if she went out as Marlene Dietrich with her eldest grandson Paulie, that she would get besieged by people. So she dressed as a nurse, and she put the boy in a stroller and went into Central Park, and nobody knew who she was. And she would come back, and instead of going back to her daughter's house, she would take the stroller right over to the Hirschfelds and have breakfast with them. Because Al Hirschfeld told me one time he loved drawing the theater because it allowed him to sleep late. It was a later breakfast at the Hirschfelds. But she was also a frequent dinner guest of theirs. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny. She would be, the way the house was, you came in on the first floor and then you walked up to where the living room and the library were. And in the living room wall was a wallpaper that had been designed by Hirschfeld that featured probably 20 different celebrities. A number of them were frequent guests at Hirschfeld's home, including Marlene. The drawing that he did that's in the sale is so iconic. It was published as a limited edition etching in the early 1980s. And the drawing had originally been owned by Alexander Cohen, who produced the show, who was also a good friend of Hirschfeld's.
Wonderful. I love it when so many of these pieces that we get belong to members of the theater or the production that happened, and Hirschfeld just was, passing off little gifts to friends. I think that's very common with artists, but also just I like that they go for a circle and now collectors can get them.
Exactly.
And have that amazing provenance. So one of my favorite pieces is the James Joyce Mickey Spillane work. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is a really unusual work. It's his only drawing of both writers.
Yes.
And it was drawn for a column that the writer John O'Hara wrote for Collier's magazine. Hirschfeld had been contributing covers and illustrations to the magazine for a couple of years, but when O'Hara joined the staff and wrote a regular column, they were illustrated by 2 or 3 different Hirschfeld drawings in the columns. And it allowed him to do a lot of drawings of figures he might not otherwise draw, like James Joyce and Mickey Spillane. And this one, I think the drawing's so wonderful because, here's the dirty secret about Hirschfeld. I'm going to tell you something. They're considered the greatest caricaturist of the 20th century. And it's an arguable fact, but he's definitely up there. And here, this drawing and the Marlene drawing are both examples. These drawings are not caricature in the way we typically consider caricature. Usually it's big heads, little bodies, anatomical distortion. It's usually a put down. Yeah. And Hirschfeld is not putting these people down. He's really joining them in what they're doing. And when you look at the Marlene drawing or the James Joyce Mickey Spillane drawing, these are not exaggerations in any type of big way. The Marlene has almost no exaggeration. It's just a beautiful drawing of a beautiful woman that captures her whole attitude. And I would argue the same is true with the drawing of Mickey Spillane and James Joyce, although we don't know them as well as Marlene. But you get a sense of who they are. Maybe James Joyce and Mickey Spillane's chin is a little bit longer than they actually were in real life. But I think the effect of when you look at them, a photograph or anything, you get that sense of the long chin. And Hirschfeld just used exaggeration, not for denigration, but for emphasis, to make you really think about it and realize how it fit into their personality.
And I really love that the way he is able to take temperament and I guess tone of a person within his lines. Like, Marlene looks just so elongated, but also just elegant, just extremely elegant in the way that the lines are drawn. And you can just see that when she was in the room, this is how it felt. And that's right. Truly amazing. And the same thing with this James Joyce work, you get a sense of seriousness and thoughtfulness, but it's not it's not a negative take by any means.
No, exactly. When he would sketch performances, when you go to theater to sketch performances, he did drawings that told him what showed him what the people look like, or how they stood or raised their hands or something. But he also included a lot of text, words that while the drawing showed him what the person looked like, the words told him what it felt like. And then he tried to capture that in his drawings. So that sort of sultry laid backness that is Marlene Dietrich, he captures that so completely in the drawing, and he does it in all the drawings that in this, because that's who he was as an artist. We look at the drawing of Othello, for instance, William Marshall. That is he really captures the how Marshall played the role, and although we often talk about Paul Robeson in Othello, he was the first Black Othello in America, and in fact Hirschfeld's drawing of that performance from 1943 sold several years ago at auction for about $33,000. Wow. This one, most critics feel that William Marshall was the quintessential American Othello. He not only played the role 6 times in America, but he also played it in England. The Smithsonian had him record the text of it because his performance was so iconic. And this is a production from 1955 when it was presented at New York City Center, considered really the first performing arts center in the country. And he captures the sort of haughtiness and the sort of how to describe Othello, but someone who is questioning, is also certain of who he is, but also very much played by Iago.
Absolutely. And I love the composition of this particular work. Just having each figure having so much character, and you can see each character and how the actors are portraying the character and how it all comes together. And yes, obviously Othello is in the foreground, but it really is dramatic and kind of brings them the ensemble, which is fabulous.
Well, Hirschfeld's drawing gives us a wonderful archive of what these productions look like, and as you said, felt like. And there's really nothing else like it anywhere. He is sui generis in that regard, and it's why his drawings were so compelling and remain so.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about musical comedy or musical serious.
Oh.
I just have to, because it's such an important part, I think, in theater history, where we're turning away from the typical happy-go-lucky musicals, and we're going into something, the beginning, I mean, West Side Story, obviously, but a tipping point where we're going to get, Les Miserables. We're going to get all the other ones incoming, because before, when you went to the theater, you're going for a happy-go-lucky time, and all of a sudden it's becoming more dramatic.
Well, he did this drawing to illustrate a piece that the playwright George Kaufman wrote for the New York Times magazine section. And Hirschfeld was well aware of the change that was happening in the theater. In some ways, it had started a little bit earlier for him, because Hirschfeld came up during a period of reviews and burlesque and flamboyant characters. When you're drawing Mae West or Ethel Barrymore or the Marx Brothers, they're already caricatures. Yeah. All he had to do was transcribe those. And then we start getting plays by Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams and William Ing, and they're writing characters that are just like everybody else. And they're played by people who want to sublimate their own personality into the character. And it proved to be the end of a lot of his contemporaries, because when you have a very meek character on stage like Laura Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie, not much to hang a traditional caricature on.
No.
But Hirschfeld was always interested in capturing character. He preferred the word characterist. And so a meek character has character just like a flamboyant character has. It's just at a different tone and maybe a different level. And so he saw musicals changing, going back to Oklahoma. But the change that was happening in 1957 was dramatic. And George Kaufman saw that not only was it dramatic, it was ripe for comedy. The piece that he wrote was not a serious piece. It was a humorous piece that was really was drawing on his own experience, because while we think of him as a great playwright, and he won the Pulitzer twice for his plays, he was also a great director. He's the man who directed Guys and Dolls just a few years earlier than this, and so many other great productions. So Hirschfeld was able to capture, Hirschfeld did in one drawing what it took George Kaufman to say in 1,000 words. In this case, a picture really is worth that 1,000 words.
Absolutely.
Because what's so great about it, you get almost two shows for one in this drawing, because he does that scene in the background of this drawing is a classic scene of an American musical. And the musical comedy, by the way, is an American invention. It doesn't exist before Americans started doing it in 1914. Arguable.
Aristophanes might have something to say about that.
Well, but musical comedies as we know it, the traditional, not operetta, not Gilbert and Sullivan are making jokes in their shows, but it's the American musical comedy is like jazz, an American invention. and he captures both sides of the story. The musical serious part of it, which is in the foreground, is seems terrifying at first glance, but the more you look at it, the more sort of humor comes into it, and the
Absolutely.
more and the juxtaposition. You know, that's what Hirschfeld is so great at, is the wit. You
Mhm.
know, he's not going to. This is not a slapstick guy. This is a guy that's going to make you smile when you think about this drawing 3 years after you see it, or you go into someone's home and you see it, and you're going to think about it later. And Hirschfeld has this sort of after effect. His drawings are so uh, unique and sort of almost trademark that you can think of them long after you've seen the drawing. And this is, I think, musical comedy, musical series is a perfect example of that.
I agree. I love the contradiction, and I love just the topic of conversation. Obviously, we can talk forever about this
Sure,
particular
no, of course.
um, but I wanted to say thank you for taking time out of your day, David. And before our collectors leave us, I wanted to explain, give you an opportunity to explain a little bit about what the foundation does, the Hirschfeld
Sure. Oh, sure.
Foundation, because it's very important. And I do think that, you are continuing Hirschfeld's legacy.
Well, thank you. Well, the Al Hirschfeld Foundation was created by Hirschfeld in the terms of his will. And for the first 10 years, 11 years, it was led by his wife, Louise. And then she stepped down because she wanted to make sure that it survived any member of the family being involved. What we do is we support theaters, performing arts, and visual arts. That is our the main thing that we do. We go to theaters all the time and help them raise money through presentations, through exhibitions, through sales of different kinds. And we put the money that we make into not only helping theaters and visual arts organizations, but they're working with the New York City Board of Education. We created a whole Hirschfeld arts curriculum for New York City schools. And now we're taking it across the country and bringing it to schools that do not have an arts education program. And we've created something that's easy for them to use, that's accessible, and all they have to do is, if they have a Wi-Fi connection, they can get access to it. So we're very excited about that. We put on exhibitions. We've got an exhibition on right now at the Museum of Broadway. We're continually bringing out new books of his work. We just had a book that came out that covered the second 40 years of his theatrical career. The American Theater is Seen by Hirschfeld, 1962 to 2002. And we're working on a slew of new projects that is going to keep Hirschfeld in front of people for a very long time.
And we're excited to be part of that. I really think that Hirschfeld's legacy and his art, if you're a collector of illustration art, you should have a piece, because he literally illustrated everyone in the 20th century.
It's a much
Literally
shorter
every
list of who he did get.
icon, everyone. If you like sports, if you like science fiction, if you like theater, if you like movies, there's something for everyone with the Hirschfeld. And I'm excited to see more.
Sure.
But
And we're excited about working with Heritage. We've never done anything quite like this before. But we felt that working with Heritage was the best way to go, because we see what they offer and we see the clientele that they have. And we're excited about working with Heritage.
well, collectors, we look forward to having you participate in our illustration art auction on April 25th.
Right.
And thank you, David, for taking the time.
Thank you.